Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The U.S. went into Afghanistan almost exactly 20 years ago now. It took us only about 2 months to dislodge the Taliban from power and another 3 months to root out al-Qaeda from the mountains east of Kabul. But then we just stayed. We started nation building and attempted to create an Afghan national army. We were used by warlords and by other government officials to target their enemies, not our enemies. We had little understanding of the underlying political dynamics. We went into places like Pesh and the Korangal valleys in search of Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda and created new enemies instead. Wesley Morgan's The Hardest Place details how those areas were actually not fertile ground for the Taliban before our arrival, but that with each civilian we accidentally killed, and we killed many, we drove their friends and their families into the arms of the Taliban. The opium fields created another dilemma. We would bomb or otherwise destroy the opium crops and drive those farmers into the arms of the Taliban, or we would allow the opium to grow and watch the Taliban shake down the farmers and use the proceeds to finance their operations, or we would give the farmers fertilizer to grow something else and then watch the farmers sell the fertilizer to the makers of IEDs. On top of all that, we flooded the country with billions of dollars, fueling the epidemic corruption that was undermining the very legitimacy of the Afghan government that we were trying to prop up. So, Dr. Call, what do you believe has been the impact of U.S. actions in Afghanistan on the conditions that allowed the Taliban and al-Qaeda to regroup and gain strength?
So I think, Senator, the stories and examples that you just used, I think, strongly suggest that we've never known as much about Afghanistan as we thought we did. I think the Secretary testified that we didn't have a 20-year strategy in Afghanistan. We had 21-year plans. All the zigzagging, the examples on the counter-narcotics front that you provided are illustrative of that. I think that we made some progress in Afghanistan. I think living conditions for many were improved. I think access to schooling for women and girls was improved. I think things got better. But a lot of the deep structural challenges that Afghanistan had, its tribal structure, its endemic corruption, the fact that it's never had a long history of a strong central government that could impose its will on the hinterlands of the country, we were not able to overcome any of that. And the Taliban were fearsome fighters who were going to fight for forever. So I think those were realities that we were not able to overcome.
You know, and I only want to push back on one point. I understand that we can point to women made progress in the country, and they may be losing a part of that. But I think it's hard to describe overall that things got better in Afghanistan. Who was caught in the middle of all of this violence? Who watched various government officials enrich themselves through corruption? Who suffered the most? Innocent Afghan civilians. The Cost of War Project at Brown University estimates that approximately 47,000 Afghan civilians were killed, along with another 66,000 Afghan military and police. And while all of this was happening, while we were creating the very conditions that were used to justify our continued presence, military officials came before this committee one after another, time after time, and said, we're making progress. We're turning the corner. General Milley told this committee last month that our presence would have been needed indefinitely. Dr. Call, do you agree with that assessment?
Yes.
And what would that have meant for the Taliban and al-Qaeda?
It would have meant that we would have had thousands of people, probably more than 2,500 over time as the ANDSF continued to lose, or we took casualties. That was at least the president's assessment. We would have been spending tens of billions of dollars every year, and also sacrificing our service members, and our participation in the war and the cost that you described would have continued.
And I would argue that if our presence would have been required indefinitely, that casts grave doubt on the years of military assessments that we were ever making progress here. This whole enterprise was a catch-22, and it should humble everyone in this room. It should cause all of us to reflect on how badly everyone got it wrong. And above all, it should be a call for Congress and this committee in particular to start exercising more oversight of the Pentagon during ongoing military operations, and instead of waiting until it's over and then politically advantageous to do so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Senator Cotton, please.
Mr. Call, you testified to Senator Tillis that you were not yet sworn in when President Biden announced his decision to